President Biden makes his first public speech following Trump's victory earlier today from the Rose Garden. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley brings us more from the White House.
President Biden addressing the nation from the White House's Rose Garden here, talking about how he called former president and now president-elect Donald Trump to congratulate him on his victory and also to invite him to the White House, although a date has not yet been announced on when that will be. Now, as far as how voters must be feeling right now, President Biden addressed that, saying that he called for unity amid political differences.
You can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree.
Biden also thanked those election workers who worked tirelessly, many of them volunteers, for getting those results processed. He also praised Vice President Kamala Harris in her campaign.
She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran.
Biden dropped out of the race back in July and endorsed Harris. Now, when asked if he regrets that decision and whether the results would have turned out differently, the White House had this to say.
President Biden believes that he made the right decision when he decided to step aside. This was not the outcome that our team had wanted. So are we disappointed? Yes, we are disappointed. But we also respect. We respect the outcome of the election. We respect what the American people voted for, wanted.
President Biden said that there's still a lot to be done within the next and last 70 or so days of his presidency. Now, earlier, he just signed an executive order which extends an emergency declaration for about 1 year that prevents the U.S. from investing in Chinese companies that go directly to help its military, saying that the Chinese Communist Party's military is a national security threat. Reporting from the White House, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The balance of power in the House of Representatives is still in play. Will Republicans have complete control over Washington, or will Democrats manage to flip the House? NTD's Washington correspondent Louise Martinez joins us with the latest from Washington. Louise, tell us what is playing out right now.
Of course, as you just mentioned, the House is still in place, so we don't have the final results. But first, let's look at the latest information we have on the balance of power in the Senate. Earlier today, the state of Pennsylvania was called for Republicans. Dave McCormick besting Democratic incumbent Bob Casey, only 31,000 votes ahead with 99% of the votes counted. So that makes 4 of the seats that Republicans flipped this cycle. If you want to look at what those are here in the map, let's look at there we go. Let's lock it. They flipped Pennsylvania, they flipped Ohio, they flipped West Virginia, and they flipped Montana. That took them to, as we just saw, to the 53-seat majority. They're still waiting. We're still waiting to see results from Arizona and Nevada. Arizona, we have Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego ahead in the exit polls with 57,000 votes ahead of Kari Lake, only 70% of the votes counted, so there's still some way to go. It's Maricopa County, the one that is lagging behind, some 600,000 votes still to be counted. And in Nevada as well, it's Clark County. We're still receiving the results, 91% of the votes counted. We have Jackie Rosen ahead by 1 percentage point of Republican Sam Brown. Now, this has been going back and forth since November 5th, so we need that 9 percentage point of the votes to be counted to know what the final tally. Before jumping to the House, Steve, I want to make a point of Maryland, because if we look at Maryland, the margin with which the Democratic contender to fill that seat left empty by Senator Ben Cardin was only 7 points. If we go back to the map and we look at the state of Maryland, over here. So this is 2024, only 7 points of difference with the Republican candidate. If we go back to 2018 when this seat was last up for re-election, look at that difference. Like over 30 points where Democrats had atop of Republicans. So we're seeing Maryland shifting at least 10 points to the Republicans across all ballot races. Now let's go to the balance of power in the House, Steve. As you mentioned, it's still in play, 435 seats up for re-election. Right now, Republicans control about 209 and Democrats 197. Waiting for the screen to load over here. But let's look at the map of the House races. The House races that we're waiting to have that final result are the ones in California. So in 2022 midterm elections, Republicans flipped from Democratic control at least 5 races in the state of California, and Democrats needed to flip those 5 races back to Democratic control if they had any chances of regaining control of the House. But as of the latest polls, we see that Mike Garcia, Ken Calvert, Young Kim, Michelle Steele, David Valadao, these are all Republicans, they're all incumbents, and they're all holding the line in the state of California. So, Steve, as of now, there's a 95% probability that Republicans keep control of the House, giving them then a trifecta and complete control of Washington. Back to you, Steve.
Luis Martinez, thank you for that report. And how will President-elect Trump's gains across all demographics nationwide affect the House and Senate races that are yet to be called? And how could the outcome of those races affect his presidency? Joining me now to assess the election results are 2 guests. Josh Lapizan is a former Democratic legislator for Nassau County in New York, and Scotty Hughes is a Republican political commentator and journalist. Great to have you both with us here. Josh, as right now it's still a bit unclear as to who will take the House of Representatives, Republicans or Democrats. If the Democrats do indeed have a path, where do you see that shaking out?
Sure. I think that publicly Democrats are optimistic, but privately many have resigned themselves to believe that they'll be in the minority for this term. I would love to have seen a Speaker Jeffries, but clearly the American people decided to give President Trump both houses of Congress as a clear mandate of his agenda. So though I believe there are some seats outstanding, unfortunately, I do think we'll be in the minority.
So, Scotty, if Republicans do win the House of Representatives and complete the trifecta, how will this affect Trump's presidency?
Well, I think a lot of people are looking to say, well, this is just going to be a continuation of his 2016 administration and policies. But here is the big difference. In 2016, he had people like Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, and a whole group of others that definitely stood up to him and took his policy and his agenda and did everything they could to stop it, probably even more than the Democrats did. This time around, especially within the Senate and the House, the people that have been elected, especially those freshmen, are those that owe the rise in politics mainly to Donald Trump. They rode his coattails in 2016, 2018, 2020, and now in 2024, they are sitting in a House seat or a Senate seat. So you're going to have a lot more of an allegiance to the Trump agenda, which I consider to be a very conservative agenda, than you've had in the past. In his first term, his biggest issue is not the Democrats. It was his own party. You're not going to have some of that same stoppage happening this time. That being said, Donald Trump has failed some of his biggest, the people that are consulting him are those that were formerly Democrats, were formerly independent. So I am hoping that he is going to be listening to what their concerns are and building legislation that truly will be bipartisan, something that's only just been in name only for the past few years.
Now, New York Attorney General, switching gears slightly here, Letitia James responded to President Trump's victory on Wednesday. I want to play a clip from her and get your reaction.
And if possible, we will work with his administration. But we will not compromise our values or our integrity or our principles. We did not expect this result, but we are prepared to respond to this result. And my office has been preparing for several months because we've been here before. We faced this challenge before, and we use the rule of law to fight back.
Josh, what do you make of her comments there saying that the rule of law, we will use the rule of law to fight back? And do you think that, with this sort of mandate that we saw on election night, that a lot of Democrats are kind of sick of this type of rhetoric?
No, it's frustrating for me. Obviously, the American people delivered a mandate to former President Trump, who's now going to be the 47th president, and to see Democrats respond in a way of resistance, as a way of fighting back, and not as a way of reaching out the olive branch and saying we're going to work together, I think is a mistake. I think it's wrong for Democrats to look at the will of the American people and say this is not something we should support. And Democrats should they don't have to agree blanket with the agenda. I certainly don't. But when it comes to inflation, when it comes to the border, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to common sense issues like crime, Democrats should be working with Republicans, not hindering progress.
Scotty, what is your assessment of this?
Well, let me commend Josh, first of all. I think he is the exact right attitude. It's the attitude that I like to have in 2020. That is what we have to be doing when you're approaching this, especially when you did just have the overwhelming mandate in 2024, like the Democrats were able to have in 2020. You've got to come at this with truly an open mind and wanting to work together. Coming in and bashing the other side, especially since they were the one that wins, only continues to build up these walls, and we don't make any progress in America. In the case of Letitia James, I think this is where her despair is coming in. A lot of these cases, and we've seen it happen down in Georgia as well as the Washington, D.C. case, were really just a lot of, I think it was a lot of filler space. It was obviously something I think Democrats are realizing they kind of shot themselves in the foot, because while they thought that they were prosecuting him and they thought that having this convicted felon label put on Donald Trump would hurt him, what they didn't realize is that was always constantly keeping his name a part of the news cycle. Every single day for the last 4 years, Donald Trump's name was said. And so to a certain extent, Democrats kind of got this outcome on their own, especially when you went up against Kamala Harris. That was not such a household name. Donald Trump's was. And so I think Letitia James, if she has any of these cases that truly have some substance to them, she should proceed. But if they don't, as so many Republicans have criticized her for, then I think you're going to see those continue to fizzle out because they're just counterproductive. If they were meant to just create, fill space, it didn't work. So let's just move on.
Josh, you are obviously a Democrat. However, you've ran a campaign in an area that has a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans. You're out there, you've spoken to both sides, you do on a regular basis. President Trump reshaped the U.S. electorate this election cycle, increasing his margins across the country in cities like Miami, New York, Chicago. Does this reflect dissatisfaction with the last 4 years, or was it more about Harris as a candidate, in your opinion?
It's a mixture of both. Steve, if you remember, we spoke in July and I said that we needed an open convention because Democrats needed to show that we're the party of transparency and we're the party of openness. And quite frankly, Kamala Harris was not second choice. But walking down the street feeling unsafe, they're tired of not being able to use the subway in their own city out of fear of crime. And so it was a mixture of dissatisfaction with the candidate and dissatisfaction with Democrats over the country in some of these cities. And it's why I'm a Democrat who says that it's time to listen to the American people who are not happy and give them a message that they want so we can win in 2028 and 2032 and beyond.
Yeah, to your point, Josh, I have spoken to quite a few Democrats who are not happy with the process of sort of anointing a candidate without going through any type of process to, vote them in. Scotty, how should the Republican Party follow through with this red wave?
Well, it's going to be whether or not, as Donald Trump said, it's promises given, promises kept. And that is exactly what I think not only the Republicans, but the American people are going to look to Donald Trump to do. For so long in Washington, D.C., there's just been this stalemate, this status quo. And the American people, it's not working for us. It might be working for the bureaucracy or inside the beltway, but it's not working for the average person when they go to the grocery store and they're coming out with $100 and only 2 bags of groceries. So they are going to want some actions. They are tired. We have dealt with the campaign rhetoric for the last 2 years. It is time to get to work. It is time to see some differences, some positive differences, both internationally within our policy as well as domestic. Regardless of whether it benefits the Republicans or the Democrats, we are going to need to see some major positive change. Americans need to have that kind of breath of fresh air and that hope.
I want to play a clip for you both of voters in Butler, Pennsylvania, where President-elect Trump obviously narrowly escaped would-be assassin's bullet in July, followed by another clip of a voter in Detroit, Michigan.
Everybody has different opinions and, whatever, but everybody comes here and it's just a nice way to get everybody together after voting. Yeah, it's just...
We leave our animosities at the door. We don't I got people who come in with, on both ends, both sides of the political divide. And not a whole lot has been said. It's been just kind of, okay, this is where we are, and this is how we have to move forward.
Josh, how can Americans and America heal from all of this polarization?
I think it starts with remembering that we have more in common than that divides us. We all want the same things. We want safe communities. We want good schools. We want lower taxes. We want a strong and thriving American democracy, and for America continue to be the beacon of the free world. And that starts with looking at somebody who may have voted for a different candidate, looking at them as a fellow patriot and American, and not as somebody who simply disagrees with you and is less than you. I'm tired of seeing Democrats label Trump voters as uneducated, or former President Biden, soon to be former president, labeling them as garbage. It's wrong. They're fellow Americans, and we have policy disagreements. And by the way, 100% of people in America are, there's a couple who are unreasonable, right? You can't reason with the unreasonable, but the majority of us are in the middle. By the way, it's why states have gone for Trump, they've gone for Obama, and they've gone for Biden, because voters are smart and they continue to change their minds. But the rhetoric of one side as being evil and the other side as the enemy, it's got to stop, and I'll continue to stand on my soapbox.
Well, it's not just you, Josh. Some very prominent Democrats, like New York Congressman Richie Torres, he's taking to the air saying very similar things. Democrat, mind you. Scotty, how do you think Americans can follow this example to move forward?
Well, first of all, preach. I think that's something that both sides can get behind. Let me tell you that I think it starts with Donald Trump and his first policy that he did as president-elect. I know you saw the announcement where he is going to have, starting on Memorial Day, for a full entire year until July 4th, 2026, he is going to celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States. And that is not something, whether you are a Republican or Democrat, left or right, that is something that if you are an American and you want to focus on the positive, you can get behind. I mean, we're talking about he wants to have a state fair in Iowa that incorporates all 50 states involved in it. A new statue garden put in Washington, D.C. that has the 50 best standouts in history of Americans. Those are the sorts of things that I think remind us that we are all one country and that we don't need to be divided. And I think that was a very smart move he did coming right out of the gate, not some policy that's left or right. This is something that we can all get behind. And I think that right there just shows what kind of he's hoping his agenda and administration is going to be this time around.
Josh Lafasan, Scotty Nell Hughes, thank you both for sharing your insights today. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.